For this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather, I'm David Percy. On to satellite imagery. There are no watches, warnings, or advisories out anywhere around the state for the next 24 hours or so. And therefore, right to the satellites here. And you can see low pressure just off the southwest coast there over the eastern Bering Sea. So the clouds moving generally north to south to the west of that feature down over the Perbolofs, and then south to north over mainland Alaska, and then northeastward there, moisture streaming into the Panhandle today for some areas of rain there. Heaviest rainfall amount occurred over the eastern North Gulf Coast, and otherwise pretty light amounts over the western interior areas. Kodiak picked up 0.13 of an inch earlier today, but you can see that area clouds lifting north. They had some clearing, it looks like, down there this afternoon, drier conditions. And a band of clouds over southern Cook Inlet gave way, allowed some earlier morning sunshine over northern Cook Inlet today. Generally a dry day up toward Anchorage and into the Susitna Valley. Otherwise, you can see the cloud shield way out west there starting to, that's associated with the next system that'll be affecting the Aleutians tonight and tomorrow. Otherwise, there's that low center, actually centered just south or southeast of Cape Newenham or south of Togiak Bay. And a lot of shower activity going on with that. North winds anywhere from 15 to 25 miles an hour from St. Lawrence Island. Across the Perbolofs and the eastern Aleutians, maybe some gusts of 30 miles an hour, but not too serious there. And again, heaviest rainfall amount, that south to north flow, and then a trough approaching the eastern North Gulf Coast. That brought about over an inch of rain to Dry Bay today, while half an inch fell at Latuya Bay, Yakutat, and Cordova, and about a quarter of an inch at Valdez. And then up in the northern Kuskokwim Valley, some of the heavier inland rainfall amounts occurred at Nikolai with about a quarter of an inch of precipitation. And then Togiak, closer into the low center, had about 0.2 of an inch. So nothing too terribly heavy, mostly kind of a showery condition across the state today. And some areas not seeing anything at all, like the North Slope out to the Arctic coast there. Some snow showers scattered in the Brooks Range, and some rainfall all the way down to the southern Panhandle. Periods of rain, for example, at Metlakatla today. And then a break there with some weak high pressure in advance of the next system over the western Aleutians, western Bering Sea. For a pretty nice day out that way, light winds, maybe some clearing, dry conditions. That'll change tonight for Shimmy and Attu late tonight as the edge of that next system starts to affect the area out there. Otherwise, looks pretty good for Adak and Atka. Low pressure stays off the southwest coast there, centered somewhere near Cape Newenham, give or take. Kind of a elongated trough there. Drop the low center right in the middle of it. Trough extending to the north will keep showers going along the entire west coast areas there and the Alaska Peninsula. And north to south flow, showers, periods of rain, maybe some fog and drizzle from St. Lawrence Island down to the Perbolofs, all the way to the north shore of the eastern Aleutian areas. Scattered showers, Kodiak Island, kind of showery for the North Gulf Coast, and some periods of rain over the northern Panhandle, but amounts are lightening up, showers down to the south. Scattered rain and snow showers depending on the elevation across the Copper River Basin, Coast Range, south central Alaska, maybe into the Talkeetnas, mainly the western Alaska Range, and some scattered snow showers also over the North Slope, eastern Arctic coast, and into the Brooks Range area. But winds pretty light most areas, but that'll increase with that system coming in. Look for gale force east and southeast winds ahead of that front, pushing across the western Aleutians early in the day tomorrow until the front moves by. And then that'll push in toward Amchitka Island, eventually Adak late tomorrow afternoon or tomorrow evening. Light winds for Amchitka Island, not too bad for the Perbolofs. Light winds there is that weak high pressure ridge, or actually area between the two lows. That one center now slipping up over the Yukon Delta and weakening. That'll keep it unsettled, cloudy, showery with areas of rain, showers, and maybe some fog and drizzle. Lower flying conditions out along the southwest coast of the Alaska Peninsula, also up into the Bering Strait. Mostly dry over the northern interior north of the Yukon River, just some isolated snow showers possible over the Brooks Range, and then dry for the North Slope and Arctic coast. Scattered showers south central Alaska, North Gulf Coast, northern Panhandle. That warm front starting to spread some more moisture into the central and southern southeast coast, mostly along the coastal areas there, so an increase in the rain tomorrow afternoon. Otherwise, scattered showers for Kodiak, and maybe some rain, light rain at times for Bristol Bay into the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, showers in the Kuskokwim Valley. And for the outlook on Monday, kind of a general trough of low pressure, a couple of weak low centers, one there just west of Eagle, and the other one out over the lower Yukon River Valley area, Kuskokwim Delta. So look for cloudy skies, showery conditions all across southern Alaska up to about the Yukon River. Then it gets a little more isolated and scattered as you head up to the Brooks Range. Of course, snow showers there. Dry for the North Slope and the Arctic coast. That front weakening, so probably only small craft advisory level winds coming into the eastern Aleutians from the southeast there with rain. And looks pretty wet, but gale force northerlies or northeasterlies coming in, wrapping around the back side of that system. You can see a tighter gradient out there over the western Aleutian areas. Otherwise, kind of a slow-moving front right along the panhandle there will bring some moderate amounts of rain from Yakutat into the northern southeast coast. Lighter amounts down to the south, but enough gradient there to produce small craft advisory level winds just about all along the coast on Monday, and even into possibly the Stevens or Clarence Strait area. But it looks like periods of rain, heaviest in the north, otherwise showery across the southern part of the state. And for the lows tonight over the panhandle, 40s to lower 50s, and in the 30s to lower 40s over southern Alaska, mostly in the upper 30s for Bristol Bay, mid-40s Kodiak Island. Highs tomorrow, upper 40s to lower 50s just about everywhere except Kodiak, trying to push 60 degrees there. Lower 60s again over the southern panhandle, but mid-50s to the north. Lows in the 30s to lower 40s again over southern Alaska there. A little milder down toward Homer, Seldovia, and Kodiak, and 40s to lower 50s for the panhandle, followed by highs again, 60 to 65 southern southeast coast, mid-50s to the north, upper 40s to near 50 over the interior, mid-50s Kodiak Island. Up to the north, lows in the 20s to lower 30s tonight, lower to mid-30s over the central interior, followed by highs in the 30s from the Brooks Range out to the Arctic coast, upper 40s to lower 50s, interior valleys, lows again mid-20s, mid to upper 20s for the Brooks Range out to the Arctic coast, 30 to 35 over the eastern interior, a little milder near 40 out toward the Seward Peninsula. Highs in the 40s south of the Brooks Range, 30s north of the Brooks Range. Out to the west, lows in the mid-30s, Perbeloff, St. Lawrence Island near 40 along the southwest coast and the central Aleutians, followed by highs just about in the 40s everywhere, some lower 50s for the Alaska Peninsula, 45 to 58 Akanatka, and mid-50s out towards Shimia. Lows dropping to near 30 for the Perbeloffs, and otherwise 30s to lower 40s, upper 30s St. Lawrence Island and the southwest coast, followed by highs in the lower to mid-50s for the Aleutians, mid-40s for the Perbeloffs and St. Lawrence Island.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to flying weather, some IFR from the central Brooks Range into the North Slope there. Marginal VFR for much of the remainder of the Arctic coast. Area of IFR there from Cape Lisburne and along the northwest coast down to Shishmaref through the Bering Strait, covering much of Norton Sound there and down across the Yukon Delta, all the way to the north shore of the Alaska Peninsula. Some VFR for Adak and Atka, and areas of IFR and marginal VFR across the southern interior with some VFR, central and east side. IFR all down the southeast coast. And for the afternoon, VFR again, mostly up over north of the Alaska Range, central eastern interior, also extending up into the Noatak Valley there. But not much change for the Arctic coast, and still a band of IFR, St. Lawrence Island down along the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta coast there. Marginal VFR, much of the southwest interior into Cook Inlet, staying VFR or VFR, northern Cook Inlet in the Mananuska-Susitna Valley, and marginal VFR, Copper River Basin, North Gulf Coast. Most of the panhandle still IFR, but pretty good zone of VFR breaking out for the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, Pribilofs ahead of the next batch of IFR pushing into the southwest Bering Sea, western Aleutians. That area pushes eastward all the way to Nikolsky on Monday morning. VFR still over the Pribilofs, Alaska Peninsula. Another band of IFR from the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, Nunivak Island, right in across the southern Kuskokwim Valley, northern Bristol Bay into southern and western Cook Inlet, Kodiak Island, and more IFR southeast coast up into the Wrangell Mountains to about Cordova or so, and a pretty narrow band of VFR up along the Tanana Valley. More IFR for the Brooks Range out to the North Slope. And for Monday afternoon, that area shifts northward to the central and eastern Arctic coast with some VFR now for the Brooks Range, marginal VFR for the Selawik, Kobuk, Koyukuk, and Upper Yukon Flats area, most of the eastern interior as well, some VFR over the central interior, northern Kuskokwim Valley, eastern North Gulf Coast seeing some VFR, patch of IFR southern Cook or central Cook Inlet there, Kachemak Bay to about the Resurrection Bay. Solid IFR for the southeast coast and the Aleutians. And Atuvik tomorrow, mostly IFR throughout the day. Same forecast for Adigan, IFR at times. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR at times for both those passes. Same forecast for Rainy, occasionally marginal there. And some VFR conditions for Windy, except possible marginal VFR in the southern approach. Isabel, marginal VFR. And for Mentasta, marginal VFR. Could be VFR at other times, mostly marginal though. Tanita, east entrance would see the lowest conditions, possibly in the marginal VFR category, better out to the west. Portage, IFR to marginal VFR, and Chilkoot and White, IFR. Freezing levels about 2,000 to 4,000 feet over much of mainland Alaska, 6,000 to 10,000 feet over the Panhandle, and 4,000 to 6,000 over the western Aleutians. Icing, two zones of the highest potential icing, considerable moderate there, sliding into the central southeast coast with that area of moisture, and then with the next system pushing into the western Aleutians. Yet another area of considerable moderate rime icing, pushing in toward Amchitka Island in the afternoon. Jet stream, pretty sharp upper trough from the Chukchi Sea down across the southwest interior, south of the Alaska Peninsula. On the west side of that feature, north to northwest winds up to 120 knots right across the Pribilofs, eastern Aleutians. Southwest winds 140 knots there, cutting up across the North Gulf Coast into the southeast interior. 9,000-foot winds, southwest 55 to 70 knots into the Panhandle, and westerly 60 knots over the western Aleutians. Otherwise not too bad on the light side for interior Alaska and the Bering Sea. And next system bringing 65-knot winds at 3,000 feet into the western Aleutians, and strongest winds will be to the southwest of the Panhandle for that area. And just some light northerlies there for the Bering Sea between that ridge north of Atka and the low over the southwest interior, probably in the 20 to maybe 25 knot range. And for turbulence, considerable moderate chop for the Panhandle, surface to 5,000 feet. Also for the western Aleutians, surface to 6,000 feet. And isolated moderate chop for the western Arctic coast.
Dual polarization technology is a major upgrade to the current radar system. It allows forecasters a better idea of what's actually out there and can help keep you safe.
Current radar technology transmits and receives information in the horizontal direction, which is very limited. Dual polarization technology, in addition to the horizontal, transmits and receives vertical energy, which allows forecasters to get information about the size, shape, and phase of the precipitation. We can use that information to better determine the precipitation type to expect at your given location.
There you have it. This new technology is currently being installed in radars across the country and is already being used by National Weather Service forecasters to produce better, more accurate forecasts. Learn more here and follow us. Want to know about the future of weather radar? Well, the National Severe Storms Lab has it here with its new phased array radar. Let's check it out.
It's a non-moving radar. It has 4 faces of the antenna, each pointing in different directions. One of the big advantages is that we're seeing so far, it can sample the area around the radar in less than a minute, maybe even a half a minute. And this is 5-6 times faster than what they can do today.
NSSL is leading the development of future weather radar with this project. Learn more here and follow us. The Storm Prediction Center is one of the NOAA weather partners. They are located in the National Weather Center in Norman, Oklahoma. Greg Carbon gives us a glimpse into what the SPC does.
Our mission is to analyze and forecast severe thunderstorms and the potential for tornadoes, large hail, and damaging winds from those thunderstorms across the lower 48 states, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. One of the primary missions of the Storm Prediction Center is the issuance of severe thunderstorm and tornado watches across the country when conditions appear to be coming together to support the development of severe thunderstorms and tornadoes.
The world-class meteorologists in the Storm Prediction Center specialize in severe weather and keeping you safe. Learn more here and follow us.
The National Severe Storms Lab is working on increasing the lead time for severe weather warnings. The national average for tornado warnings is currently 13 minutes, but more notice would be helpful, especially for those in charge of moving large groups to shelter. Warn on Forecast will help forecasters issue hazardous weather warnings earlier. The project will give them more info about the chances of strong winds, large hail, and even tornadoes.
Currently, warnings are created by forecasters looking at the atmosphere outside, understanding its volatility, and then comparing that to how they see the Doppler radar presenting what's going on inside thunderstorms. Warn on Forecast is an idea where we're going to take the massive amounts of satellite, radar, and surface data and stick them all into a very high-resolution prediction model. And then by producing new forecasts every 15 or 20 minutes, the forecasters hopefully will be able to use that model to produce warnings that extend out to an hour.
Before the National Weather Service can use this tool, it must be developed and tested. One big challenge will be deciding how to get the model predictions to the forecasters.
I'm going to keep this one very low. I'm just adjusting the track.
These hazardous weather prediction models are going to produce a huge amount of output. And this fire hose of data is just too much for forecasters to handle in real time quickly. So in order to help deal with that, NSSL has developed a related project called Facets. And Facets is the methodology which will enable forecasters to focus very quickly on the most important threats.
Once Warn on Forecast and Facets are proven to be reliable and effective, then forecasters will be better able to inform you of threats nearby. Learn more here and follow us.
The Hazardous Weather Test Bed is located at the National Weather Center in Norman, Oklahoma. It is used for experiments that will allow forecasters to learn and apply new technologies.
The Hazardous Weather Test Bed is a really unique space throughout all of NOAA. And this is where the researchers and the operational folks come together in a common space to solve operational problems and to test new research tools that the research community is working on. The goal is to accelerate the transfer from research to operations of the newest tools and techniques.
People come from around the world to collaborate on this unique project.
We can bring together not only NOAA people, but also university people, faculty, researchers, private sector meteorologists, folks working in other countries in meteorology, forecasters, can all come together and focus on what the problem of the day is with the forecasters.
Each spring, several experiments occur in the hazardous weather test bed. Learn more here and follow us.
What are you looking at? And what are you ignoring? Did you notice the NOAA logo in the corner? Forecasters have a lot of information in front of them too. Every second counts during severe weather, and decisions about where to focus are constantly being made. This could be even more challenging in the future. Phased array radar will produce 4 to 6 times more information than what we have now, which brings us to the question researchers are hoping to answer. Will more radar information affect forecasters' decisions?
From our past experiments, we've learned a lot about how forecasters think during the warning decision process, but we've also learned that those thought processes are very complex, and for that reason, we need a better way to be able to track forecasters' cognitive activity.
Inbounds and possibly golf ball sized hail.
And eye tracker is a piece of technology that is used to determine in real time where someone's eye gaze is located. And these eye trackers are typically video-based, which means a camera sits below a computer monitor, and with infrared light and vector analysis, we can determine where a person is looking and how their eyes are moving.
Eye tracking is already being used in the medical field and air traffic control. Using similar research methods, NSSL is discovering the benefit for weather forecasting too. Phased array radar will give forecasters a lot more to think about. Understanding their decision-making process will help researchers develop even more user-friendly tools. So what's the benefit for you? Even better weather warnings. To learn more, check us out online and follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at the coastal forecasts for the south coast there, the panhandle, south to east winds at about 15 knots. North coast looking at southerly winds, 15 knots, seas about 6 feet. Central northern interchannel, southeast winds at 10 knots. Seas not too bad, about 2 feet or so. And for Clarence Strait, southeast at 15. And then for the day on Monday, pick up in the winds there. Southerlies 30 knots for the south coast, southeast 30 knots on the north coast, with seas running anywhere from 12 to 17 feet. Small craft advisories for Clarence Strait, south winds 25 knots, and southeast winds 25 knots for Stevens Passage, and for Lynn Canal, southeast winds 15 knots. For the eastern North Gulf Coast, light variable winds tomorrow at 10 knots. Prince William Sound, not much different, but southeast on the direction at 10 knots. Barren Islands and the western North Gulf Coast looking at south winds at 15. And Kamishak Bay, southeast at 20. Southern Cook Inlet, southeast winds 15 knots, 4-foot seas. Light variable winds for northern Cook Inlet. And for the day Monday, northern Cook Inlet, northwest at 15 knots. Southern Cook Inlet and Kamishak Bay, northerlies at 20 knots. And for the Barren Islands and the North Gulf Coast, those areas looking at a west wind at 15 knots for Monday with 7 to 10-foot seas. Light northwest breeze for Prince William Sound at about 10 knots. Kodiak Island for Sunday, south winds at 15 knots. And for the Alaska Peninsula, northwest winds 15 to 20 knots with 6 to 8-foot seas. Southwest winds 10 knots with 4-foot seas. And for Monday, Kodiak Island, west-southwest winds 15 knots, 3 to 7-foot seas. And small craft advisories for the Alaska Peninsula, south winds 25 knots on the Bering Sea side, Pacific side, southwest at 30 knots with 11-foot seas. And Bristol Bay, winds should be south at about 20 knots, seas running around 4 feet. And for the central and eastern Aleutians for Sunday, northwest winds 20 knots, seas 6 to 10 feet in those areas. And for the western Aleutians, 30 to 40 knot winds out of the southeast with 8 to 13-foot seas. For the day Monday, gale warnings for the western Aleutians, north to northwest winds 35 knots. And gale warnings also for Adak and Atka, northwest winds up to 35 knots, seas 15 feet. Small craft advisories for the Fox Islands, South to southwest winds at 30 knots. And for the southwest coast tomorrow, northwest winds 15 to 20 knots with 5 to 8 foot seas. And north winds 20 knots there for St. Lawrence Island. Norton Sound, winds looking east at 15 with 3 foot seas. North 20 knot winds for St. Matthew Island, seas there at about 8 feet. And for the Pribilof, small craft advisories, northwest winds 25 knots with 10 foot seas. For Monday, St. Paul, St. George Islands looking at east winds at 25 knots, seas at around 8 feet. Kuskokwim Delta coastline, south winds 20 knots, north winds 20 knots for St. Matthew Island, light variable winds along the Yukon Delta coast Monday, and for St. Lawrence Island, winds will be northeast at 15. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast for Sunday, east winds 20 knots, northeast 20 for the for the central coast. West side there down to Cape Thompson, east northeast at 30 knots. Cape Thompson to Wales, east winds at 20 knots with 5 foot seas. And then for the day Monday, from Wales to Cape Thompson, northeast winds 20 knots, seas 5 feet. Small craft advisories from Cape Thompson up to around Point Lay, maybe Wainwright, for east-northeast winds at 25 knots. Otherwise, the central coastline looking at east winds at 15 knots and 20 knot easterly winds for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast with seas around 4 feet. For tonight, low pressure, actually a trough all along the west coast with a center there near Cape Newenham. We'll keep breezy conditions with areas of rain and showers over the eastern Aleutians Pribilofs to St. Lawrence Island, and scattered showers over the western interior, rain and snow showers south central Alaska, Copper River Basin, and the western Alaska Range with some snow showers over the North Slope and Brooks Range. Areas of rain for the North Gulf Coast areas, and warm front spreads rain up to the Panhandle, again mainly along the central and south coast in the afternoon, more showery to the north, but still cloudy and unsettled over the western and southwest interior. Same thing for south central Alaska. Rain and snow showers depending on your elevation with maybe a few sun breaks possible. And then the next system bringing gale force winds and rain eastward with wind increasing over the Fox Islands with rain, and it stays cloudy and showery over southern Alaska.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.